So, on behalf of the BC Brain Wellness Program, I really welcome you to this workshop on building resilience through nutrition and exercise. And today we have the good fortune of having two excellent speakers with us. So, I'm going to introduce them both and then hand it over to them. So, we have Kate Landreth with us from who is the Education and Learning Lead with Family Caregivers of BC. Kate completed her Bachelor of Arts from Wilfrid Laurier, and her Bachelor of Education from Nipissing University, and her Master's of Education from Murdoch University. She's an educator, facilitator, and coach specializing in learning design, training, and curriculum development. She applies her training in mindfulness and yoga alongside her deep experience in curriculum and learning. Kate has witnessed firsthand the immense but often underappreciated role of the caregiver. She recognizes that those giving care need meaningful support and support systems to maintain their own physical and mental well-being in challenging circumstances, and is certainly committed to that support in her work at Family Caregivers of BC. So welcome, Kate. And we also have Amy Freeman with us, and Amy has spoken in our workshops in the past, so some of them she might be familiar to some of you. Amy received her Master's of Social Work degree from the University of British Columbia in 1998, and she has practiced in the healthcare field for over 2 decades and has worked at the Holy Family Hospital Geriatric Rehab Program, as a home health case manager, and as a social worker on geriatric psych programs. She has also taught as a sessional instructor at UBC School of Social Work and as a field instructor for social work students, and is currently the social worker at the Clinic for Alzheimer's Disease and Related Disorders. She is also a level 2 certified CrossFit, a personal trainer, a WAG certified nutrition coach, and fitness instructor with the BC Brain Wellness Program. So I welcome you as well, Amy. Thank you. And with that, I am going to turn it over to our speakers, Kate and Amy. Over to you.
So thank you, Elaine, and I'm so happy to be here. As Elaine mentioned, I'm Kate Landreth, and I am from the Family Caregivers of BC organization. And just for those of you that might not know about us, we are a nonprofit charity, and we're dedicated to helping the well-being of family caregivers. And so our terminology might be just a bit different. We used it, family caregivers is our term that I'll be referring to in the presentation. We are a nonprofit that is funded primarily through the Ministry of Health. And as you can see on the screen, the second pillar today is what we'll talk about. So the webinar for caregivers, and the intent is to provide education to you on some helpful resources and supports in your family caregiving role. So a little pathway of our learning this morning. We'll start with doing a breathing and mindfulness moment, and then we'll go into self-reflection and learning about resiliency, ways to build your resiliency muscle, and strategies to add in healthy foods and movement. And then the discussion with and for you will be sprinkled in throughout our presentation today. All right, so to bring our whole self into this moment and into the morning, or Monday morning, I'm going to offer you a 3-minute breathing space to support you with getting grounded. So if you can take a moment to uncross your legs, ground your feet, and you can either settle your eyes down in a gaze, or maybe you bring them closed. And taking more of an alert, so an upright posture, so that your spine is tall. And acknowledging for a moment how you're feeling. So your thoughts, any body sensations, any feelings of the heart. And take a nice big breath in and slow breath out. Bring your attention to the sensation of your belly. And as you're breathing in and out, noticing your belly expanding and contracting, your chest rising and falling, using your breath right now as an anchor point to right here, right now, the moment that you're in. And start to expand your awareness to your entire body. So from the top of your head all the way down to the soles of your feet, bringing some awareness into all areas of your body with no judgment of sensations or feelings, but more to be a witness and to be aware. And then carrying that awareness into the next few moments here in our presentation and maybe into your day. You can start to bring your eyes open, coming back into this space. Thank you for participating, or maybe just sitting and allowing yourself to pause this morning. Okay, so caregiving. I assume that you're here, and so you are a caregiver, so this won't be a surprise to you, but it is an issue that affects all Canadians. So 1 in 4 Canadians are caregivers, and they're caregiving for someone with a long-term health condition, disability, or need related to aging at some point in our lives. And it's estimated that 75% of care is provided by unpaid caregivers. And so that saves our Canadian healthcare system billions of dollars a year. And our society simply just would not function without caregivers. So the reason I start with this statistic is to remind you how valued and important your role is. And today it is my hope that I'll share some information, maybe some inspiration, and ultimately probably reminders of ways that you can care for yourself while also caring for someone else. The pace and duration of caregiving can look very different for each caregiver. So maybe it starts by dropping your mom by your mom's house and you're doing laundry for her, or you're taking her to a doctor's appointment. Or maybe it's you're calling your adult child who has depression every day to check in with them. But then you find yourself doing the regular grocery shopping or refilling prescriptions for your mom. Or maybe your daughter starts calling and you're making dinners for her every few days. So gradually you find yourself doing more and more. And often what happens and what we hear is that you don't even realize it, that you're making a commitment to care for someone else. And sometimes caregiving can also be triggered by a major health event. So acute diagnosis, such as a serious fall, a stroke, a heart attack, a cancer diagnosis. But life as you know it stops, and all your energy starts to go to caring for someone that is not able to fully care for themselves. So the caregiver pace. So finding a caregiver pace that is sustainable is really, truly important for yourself. The important part is to ensure that between the sprints of caregiving, that we return to a more balanced way of living. And also, during those sprints, that we do still take care of ourselves. It might look different, but we still take the time and care to fuel ourselves. So caregiving often is not something any of us can anticipate. It's not usually something we sign up for. It's not usually something we train for, and it becomes the new normal of our life. It can be emotionally and physically very demanding and even downright exhausting. And it can be one of the most rewarding gifts, too, that we can give to another person. So on this slide, I want to highlight that usually this happens, the caregiving role, when our plate is already full. And we try to squeeze this role, which is usually a pretty big role, into an already busy schedule without letting something else go. So caregiving does require us to adjust, to modify our schedules. And often, and we hear this a lot at FCBC, the very thing that we need to stay healthy are the things that start to slip away. I want you to pause for a moment and take a moment to reflect on these 4 questions. So, how is my current self-care? How resilient do I feel? How do I need, what do I need for support? And where do I turn? So these are self-reflection questions, but if you feel like you would like to share in this small, safe group, in the chat box, number 1, just the current self-care. You can share maybe what's going well and that you are practicing, or maybe what's not going well. And I just want to preface here that this is a space for non-judgment. And quite often, especially with caregivers, I find when I'm talking with them, that needs to be reminded to yourself. There's no judgment. It's more just to take that moment of, how am I doing? How is my self-care? And also putting in a good scoop of self-compassion as you are reflecting. So again, I'm just going to give you a moment of pause here. Maybe you have a notebook out and you're doing it in a notebook. That's great. If you do feel like you would like to share in the chat, please go ahead and share. There's no pressure. But just to start to see quite honestly and usually transparently that we're all usually in going through similar things. And so if you're new to Zoom, that it's at the bottom and there's a button there for the chat that you can press and you can type it in if you feel called to share this morning. Yeah, thanks, Elaine. Self-care fluctuates. I definitely feel I'm a new mom. And so I have a little 1-year-old, and my self-care definitely fluctuates right now in this season of my life. Okay, I'm going to move on, but you can take these questions and just know that they're there for you to reflect on. So the self-reflection questions that I shared are a practice that helps to strengthen your self-awareness. Your self-awareness is the ability to know your internal state, your preferences, your resources, your values, and your intuition. And a key element to weave in as you reflect, and I mentioned, is self-compassion and non-judgment. And I usually say no shoulding on yourself. The shoulds, I should do this, I should do that. This self-awareness is the foundation of self-care. It allows you to monitor your inner thoughts, your emotions as they rise, and this supports you in taking action. Okay, self-care. I know as I was starting to prepare for this presentation and I researched self-care and resiliency, I know it is a buzzword. And there are many misconceptions that self-care means self-indulgence or being selfish. And it's not true. Self-care means taking care of yourself so that you can be healthy, you can do your job, you can help and care for others, and you can do all the things that you need and want to do each day. Self-care is part of the answer to how we can better cope with these daily stressors. Self-care isn't a spa treatment, although that does sound very lovely. It's more so about knowing what will comfort you and taking these small, manageable steps to try and get those needs met. It is acknowledging how you're feeling, identifying those red flags that might be on the road to burnout. You can kind of, oh, here I go. Oh, I'm starting to get angry. Things are starting to fluctuate here. And then choosing to integrate activities that can create comfort in your life. And again, I just want to remind you, it's a practice, that you don't master self-care or self-awareness, that we're always evolving and changing. So self-care and resiliency, they're related. There is a reason I'm outlining self-care and self-reflection. And one of the key ways to build resilience is to focus on taking care of yourself. It helps to keep your mind and body primed to deal with these situations that require resilience. So a question that you can ask yourself throughout your day, throughout your week, you can sprinkle it in whenever you need it. What will support me at this moment? Sometimes it might be a long walk, or sometimes it's a rest. It could be calling a friend. It could be saying no to a social event. So really, it's this check-in point and this continual, like, oh, how am I feeling? What do I need right now? Okay, so self-care, I'm just going to click all through these so they come up on the screen and you'll see them, and then I'll speak to them. So self-care is not self-improvement. These activities on the screen here, they're activities of self-care, and they can be beneficial and have positive effects on your health, on your fitness. But the main goal here is to meet your own needs, to feel better, cared for, and or more grounded. Okay, so I'm going to go into just a little bit of these, but there's self-compassion, connection, personal supports, resiliency, balance, and action plans. And when I was thinking and researching more about resiliency, I saw that these practices that are there are strategies that we use to build our resiliency tank. And I've also experienced this in my own personal life. Resiliency is this accumulation of practicing self-compassion, connection with yourself and with others, having a circle of care and personal supports in your life, balance, which could, for caregivers, it means respite, and action plans. So each of these practices could be a presentation in and of itself. And our organization at FCBC has materials on each of these topics because we know the importance of each one of these. And also, Amy is going to dig into nutrition and movement. So it's more about physical resiliency, which also impacts our emotional resiliency as important pieces to that resiliency puzzle. Okay, I want you to now pause. So we're starting to dig into resiliency just a little bit more. What does it actually mean? What does it look like? What does it mean to you when I say resiliency? So this is something I would love for you to share in the chat box, what resiliency means to you. Maybe it's your personal definition. And again, there's no right or wrong because I do think it's very nuanced. So please feel free to hop in the chat and share what resiliency looks like for you. And just as you're thinking and maybe ready to share, I'll share mine. Resiliency to me means being able to identify the flags when I know that I am not feeling my best. So I'm seeing things, and then I'm either asking for support or I'm asking for a break. And then I'm actively doing that, even though I might feel guilt around it, or some like, adverse feelings of like, oh, I shouldn't need this, but I'm still doing it anyway because I know it will be better for myself, my family, my workspace, my community. And so that's just my own personal, and that has evolved since being a new parent and also a caregiver. Susan, thank you. My capacity for daily tasks without exhaustion. Ooh, I feel that. Resiliency to me means a deep connection to my inner self and those around me. Great, thanks, Catherine and Howard. To be able to stand up and carry on. Yeah, I very much feel that you are able to deal with the challenging pieces and not get knocked down. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And again, if something comes to mind and you want to pop it into the chat box, do it at any point. Oh, there's one more here. Oh, Ben, thanks. Being able to bounce back without being knocked down. Yes, I feel that. Okay. I think the most important thing to remember about resilience is that it's a skill set. It is something that we learn and that we practice in order to get better at it. And for me, this is a relief because some days I feel like I'm doing really good. And then other days, it is a big challenge. So it's important to remember also that baked into this experience of being a human, that will suffer and that will face hardship, and that it's not going to go smoothly all the time. And I feel and I see this with caregivers is that caregiving really highlights this. However, when we start to feel more mentally and physically healthy, we're able to grow from our challenging experiences. Now, again, I'm pausing because I want you to take a moment to read the reflection questions. And if you can, again, embed that non-judgment and self-compassion when you're thinking about answering. You don't need to share these in the forum because I know that these might be more personal. But I think making a mental note right now, just your current resilience level. And maybe you feel like, yeah, I can share. By all means, you can share how you are feeling in this moment. Well, I have another question in a few slides you can tap into. But this slide really is just a moment to pause. And then also looking that when we start to build that resiliency muscle, that there is this sustainment of our health and our mental health that starts to happen. There is this more understanding and kind of this greater birth to feel like we can deal with things. And there is some reduction in susceptibility to stress. So those are just the benefits when we start to build this resiliency muscle. And I often think of this when I teach mindfulness. Often I hear right away is like, I can't do it. My mind's busy. It's too hard. And I often use this analogy of the mind like a muscle. Well, it is. And also, like you go to the gym and you lift your weights or you do your exercises, we're building the muscle in our arm. And the same thing here with mindfulness, when we're trying to pause and just get quiet, it doesn't mean that the thoughts go away. They will be there. You're noticing and you're bringing your attention back, usually to an anchor point of the breath. So it's like flexing that muscle. Every time your mind goes off into thought, you bring it back. Resilience is similar to that. You know, we slip away from the center of our being and what we need and how we need to take care of ourselves. Off we go. We're taking care of all the other people. And then we come back. That muscle of flexing and coming back, that's building the strength of really strengthening that resiliency muscle. Just going to check the chat box just so I have okay, I just want to, I feel like this is so meaningful when people share these pieces. Remembering who I am. I think I might have I apologize if no, I'm not. Okay, the strength I have to juggle it all, finding mini breaks for myself, so important. I'm disabled and I care for my husband, my service dogs, and the rest. Yeah, so, a lot of people, and I took this slide out and maybe I should have left it in, but a lot of caregivers have their own physical or mental ailments. And so it doesn't mean that you're without your own personal health and struggles, but also on top of that, you're caring for someone else. And so those mini breaks, that flex of coming back to yourself is so important. Remembering who I am in the midst of challenges. Yes, like coming back to your breath, remembering your values, your beliefs, and I'll get into that a little bit more. I love the practice of journaling. So getting in touch, kind of like brain dump, all of it out, practicing breathing to help with the nervous system. So, so important. And yes, this too shall pass. Those, it's almost like having your little mantra. Sometimes I have stickies in my house on certain times that I can remember and bring myself back to these important reminders. Oh, my apologies. Okay. So a few final points. I know it's sometimes helpful to have tangible things or notes or how-tos with building resiliency. And so I'm going to go through these and I'll pause. And if there's something that comes up, like you're sharing in the chat box, I find it so meaningful to have people share what they're doing. And so the first thing is cultivating a positive outlook. And that means accepting the imperfections of caregiving and not staying with those negative thoughts too long. You'll have negative thoughts. That's a part of life, but not maybe getting gripped by them for a long period of time. So the best you can, choosing to have a positive outlook. And again, noting that this is a continual practice, that you're not one and done. It's happening all the time, trying to choose to see something maybe from a different perspective. Reframing stressful situations and even taking a pause, space if you can, to help alter how you might be perceiving something. For myself, I know, and I just want to pin this. I know that not everyone can do this, especially when you're caring for someone else. But if you can go for a brisk walk, you can maybe put in a podcast or maybe listening to music, getting and removing yourself to decompress can be really helpful to return to maybe a stressful situation with a new perspective. Creating a network of support. So our kind of tagline at FCBC is that caregiving cannot be done alone. You need your friends, you need your family, and you need community support with you. And so in our organization, we have caregiver support groups, and we find that this can be really helpful for feeling seen and heard. We talk a lot about creating a circle of care and mapping that out in terms of getting more support. It could be formal respite, that you have breaks that you need, and I have to say, you do need breaks. And so that's just an important reminder there of that. And then actually it said, I had a number 4, it said, nurture your inner superhero. However, I'm triggered with superhero because it has this flavor that you can do it alone and you can't. And so I changed it to nurture yourself. So practicing self-compassion and kindness to yourself is so, so important. And again, in our self-care and our strategies, self-compassion is one pillar of that. And it's a practice. And I do a whole presentation on self-compassion mindfulness. And I took a course in self-compassion mindfulness. And I will say it was probably one of the hardest strategies to implement. And so it's reminding and giving yourself grace. Staying in the present is really important. And a lot of the time, our internal struggles get heightened when we want things to be different than what they are. So returning to your present experience can be so very helpful. Your values and your core beliefs. So I saw in the chat box, and I love this, where it's like remembering who I am. And we have at Family Caregivers a journaling workshop that we offer, and it's very much a contemplative practice. And it's reminding yourself that you are a caregiver, but you also are so many other things. And sometimes we have to be reminded that you are a full human being, and caregiving is maybe a large portion of your life, but it's not the only part. And so remembering your core values and beliefs is really important while you're caring for someone else and you're caring for yourself. So you have a very valuable role, and it's so meaningful. And then remembering your why, your well-being, physical and mental. So this is very important, and Amy's gonna take it away soon in terms of why it's so important. But for now, just this reminder that it helps with improving your mood, it helps with sleep, it helps with cognition, it helps with emotional responses to things and reactivity, and it helps with immunity. So movement truly can be a prescription for stress and anxiety. And actually recently during COVID, doctors were handing out RXs for movement. And so I think that is an important reminder that movement can really, really benefit our stress levels and our emotional well-being. Okay, I want to pause just for another moment. Is there something in those 8 resiliency factors that you're like, oh, yeah, really important to me, and I'm also practicing? Because often you can see things that are like, I'm actually doing that really well, and I might be not doing this as well. And that's, not for any judgment there, but I think sometimes we lean on certain things and that gets us through, but other elements we might need to strengthen or consider. And I will say with caregiving, often what we see is that circle of support. Sometimes it's really hard to ask and receive help. And so maybe that might be, something to consider, but I'm happy if you had something to share, to add it into the chat. Oh yes, Heather, thanks for sharing that. It can be really helpful to ask yourself, or to what you'd advise a friend to do. I know, treat yourself like you would treat a friend in the situation. Yeah, that's great. Applying the advice that you would provide someone else to yourself and being kind. Okay. Again, feel free to pop it into the chat if you're feeling called. Yeah, educating your knowledge. Okay, that actually, thanks for saying that, Howard. I do feel that often resiliency for caregiving can increase. So when you have more knowledge, right? You might have more knowledge about the person you're caring for. So maybe it's a disease and you start to learn more about that and you get more resources for them. And like you're doing all these things for your care recipient. I do feel like that can be so beneficial. Often we're left in this unknown. Navigating the healthcare system can be so challenging. So when we start to have more supports there, or we feel like we can advocate for ourselves and our care recipient, it starts to bring this confidence and momentum where it's like, yeah, I can do this. And then, the ball gets rolling and we start to maybe take care of ourselves. So it is this two-pronged thing. We're taking care for our care recipient and we're feeling like we're able and strong enough to do that. But also at the same time, making sure that we're increasing and building our own physical and mental well-being, because we can only take care of someone. It's that oxygen mask scenario, right? You have to put your own on first before you can care for someone else. And often we forget that because then we get depleted, and burnout is huge in caregiving, especially when caregiving is for a long period of time. It could be a sprint for some people and then the caregiving journey is done. But for many people, it's years of caregiving. Yes, thank you. for sharing these, educating, finding positive meaning and a sense of purpose. I love that. Thank you, Catherine, for sharing that. Yes. Building a rescue system of people, a what if plan. Yes, we totally, we talk about this a lot in caregiving, where we have the plan A, B, C, and D plan. And, often sometimes caregivers are like, oh, I have to do one more thing. However, it's this mental thought process that goes into this, so that then maybe you can pause and have a moment of like, okay, I have some things aligned and in for support. Okay. I want to highlight here on this slide, this is more kind of research based, but the physical resiliency, as this is something that Amy's going to speak to. And it means here, so you can see that dimensions of resiliency. We have emotional, we have spiritual, we have mental, and we have physical. And they all overlap and they all depend on one another, right? So one might be high and the other might be low. And so we do try to find balance, but there's never always a true balance. We might be doing really well in one area and not so well in the other, but it's really just to take note that we're a full human being and these are our needs here. So I'm going to move forward just so you can see here the physical resiliency, because this is something that we'll talk about with Amy. So feeling physically strong in our body, having good stamina. I know someone spoke about that, like just being able to go through the day and feeling like I'm not totally depleted at the end of the day. Able to keep up with the physical aspects of caregiving, and having the energy to be active in whatever shape or form that takes, right? So maybe you're caregiving and then you want to go and see a friend and have coffee. So being able to have that energy to go out and spend and fill that, that part of yourself that really needs it. And then emotional resiliency is staying positive overall. Obviously, we have our moments, but self-regulating our reactions to situations or conflict in relationship. And often I know for myself that I'll find I'm really heightened in responding to something quickly, or have more of like an anger reaction, or what I say, like a bad reaction, I feel badly. But often when I'm doing that, I know because there are some needs not being met, or maybe there's assumptions happening. So there needs to be maybe a check-in with myself, like, what do I need right now? That moment of like, okay, I need this, and how can I communicate it? Remaining flexible and adaptable during emotional storms. So this is inevitable. We're going to have fluctuations in our moods, in emotions, and some things can be really triggering during caregiving. And it's how can we support ourselves? And maybe that is being with a clinical counselor and having time to have one-on-one. Maybe it's in a caregiver support system, a group scenario. There's lots of ways that you could do and get support for emotional support, and able to have perspective and see the bigger picture. Okay, before I hand it off to Amy, what makes, this is segueing into our physical, so movement and nutrition. But for you, we're really curious to know what makes emotional and physical resiliency challenging. So what could be some barriers for yourself? So you can take a moment, and if you're feeling brave and you want to share as well, how resilient are you feeling in this current moment? And again, there's no judgment here, because we know that it fluctuates from day to day and sometimes even moment to moment. So you are welcome to share. Oh, and Catherine, thank you so much for sharing that. That Atlas of Caregiving, I just dug into that from a presentation I was just in, and actually in contact with them to get them to present for us. Amazing resource and such a good way to map out your support. So thanks for sharing that. Thanks, Heather, for sharing. So what makes things hard is burnout, exhaustion, physical and emotional pain, making self-care and emotion resiliency challenging. Yeah. So when you're tired and you're burnt out and you're in pain, obviously those things will be barriers to feeling like you can take care of yourself. When feeling low, it's hard to mobilize and exercise because of fatigue, and it's a negative snowball with mood and exercise. Yeah, I feel that. Emotional and physical resiliency is challenging when I attempt to multitask. Yes. I'll share my own. As a new mom, I was so sleep deprived. And I remember, like, my doctor, my care team saying, like, just go out and have a walk, just go out and do some movement. And I was so frustrated because I was like, I have no energy. However, I will say that those movement moments, when I finally did, I had to choose between rest or movement, they did actually start to help me and my mind. Maybe not my body because I was still tired, but it did help with my mental state. Okay, thank you for sharing and being vulnerable in the chat box. It is so, it just reminds us that we're all in similar scenarios, and the human experience, although we can have different situations of caregiving and personal experiences, that often the feelings and body sensations can be quite similar. Okay, Amy, I hope I didn't take up too much time.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Kate, and for all those great shares. That's really helpful for this next piece. So I really appreciated, Kate, how you illuminated how important it is for us to work on building our resiliency muscle so that we can go stronger from life's challenges. And that's really what it's about. How can we strengthen ourselves from what we're going through? And I know this has been said, but certainly being a caregiver brings with it a lot of challenges and hard work. And all of you know that only too well, as you've shared. It requires a lot of strength and tenacity, and at times can really wear us down. So I want to talk to you today about some strategies we can employ to buffer ourselves against the strain of caregiving that it can place on our bodies. And the truth is, and Kate mentioned this just at the end there, the better we feel overall, the better we are able to manage what falls before us. And there are some daily actions we can take in terms of what we eat and how we move, that if we're able to take them, it can better prepare us for what gets thrown our way. So what I'd like to focus on, in the ideal world, the goal is to build up a nutrition exercise practice that serves you well. And when the going is good, you've built it while the going is good, or in a good moment, so that when you have it going, you're able to regain some solid footing sooner than later when something comes your way that rocks the boat. It can be very hard to start something new in the midst of a crisis, but if those habits are already in place, sort of as a second nature, you can find it easier to rely on them through hard times. So we do want to talk about nutrition and movement, and I'm sure you've all heard the advice about how important it is to eat well and exercise, but these are broad sweeping statements, and we all have our own interpretation. What does it mean to eat well and exercise? What foods, how much exercise, what type? And frankly, it can be overwhelming. So the goal today really is to just provide a simple approach to these matters. It can be a real extra challenge to eat well and exercise as a caregiver. So what are some strategies we can put in place to up our ante on that front, especially when we're feeling down? As people have said, I'm feeling exhausted. How can I eat better or get out to exercise? And this slide sort of says it all. When we're stressed, we feel emotionally and physically depleted, and we want quick energy. And this can lead to us reaching for comfort foods, i.e. substances high in sugar and fat, which will initially calm us down, but not serve us well in the long run. So, I had a family member in hospital, and the last thing I wanted to do was come home and make myself, a healthy meal. The only thing I wanted was, chips and chocolate and a ginger ale. So that's just sort of sometimes our gut reaction. And it's not to say we can't have treats, that's completely fine. It's just when it's a general coping strategy, that's what we're relying through to get through the day. We're living on chocolate or coffee because we're so tired and fatigued. And these types of foods that we see here, in the long run, they do rob us of our energy, and that can create other problems for us that we want to avoid. They can disrupt our sleep, all sorts of things. But the point of this morning is not to talk about what not to eat, but really what can we add into our diet to make us feel better. So, but before we do that, I just want us to take a moment. I'd like to get a sense of people in the room. You know, how are you feeling about your nutrition right now on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being like, it's fantastic. This is not an area that is a concern, to maybe like a 2 or a 3, it's so, or a 5, it's okay, or there's room for strength changes. What do people think? How is it going for you out there? We have some 3s, some 7s, some 6s, a 1.5. Thank you for sharing that. So awareness is important. Yes, someone said an 8. Awareness is important. And then 9, well done, good work. I'd like to on a 5. So we have the whole range here, which is really myself, I fluctuate around sort of with K to 6, 7. It's hard to be consistent too. It depends. It's always going to be sort of a work in progress. But some ways we can look at this, thanks for sharing, is, and the framework we want today is, how can we build in more good foods to our diet, knowing that eating well will build strength. So for the purpose of this talk, I just want to consider eating well being a diet that's probably 80% composed of whole foods. So by that, we mean things without ingredient labels that people might say you can find on the perimeter of the grocery store, but no, there are some really good things you can find in the frozen section. Frozen broccoli is not going to have so much of a label. Frozen vegetables are great, fruits, but things that really don't have many ingredients and do not have a long shelf life. So that's what we're looking for. And this might seem like a strange concept. If you're used to eating, say for breakfast, a muffin and coffee, we want to think of how could we make that better? Could we add some berries to that muffin and coffee? Thank you. I'm talking about, if we want it, focusing on maintaining a healthy weight, and how can we do that through what we eat? So what can we add to our diet? First and foremost, can we look at our plates and think, we want it to be balanced. By balanced, it means there is a protein source on that plate. So, a lean fish, chicken, a source of meat, maybe tofu, lentils, something high in protein. There's a carbohydrate on that plate. So that could be pasta, rice, a whole grain, a sweet potato, something like that as a carb, and then some form of fat, an avocado or butter. So we've given you some examples there of balanced plates, and just trying to focus on the issue if we want more whole foods versus processed. Next slides, thanks. And this is really what I want to talk about more, is the challenges to eating well. And I'm just going to read a note in the chat here from Catherine. And she says, when my husband was first diagnosed with PD 10 years ago, I was following Lauren Micheley's suggestions based on her research. Micheley finds people with Parkinson's that are doing the best over time are eating fresh fruits and vegetables, non-fried fish, nuts, seeds, olive oil, coconut oil, wine, fresh herbs, and spices. She knows that this closely resembles the Mediterranean diet, and her husband fixes himself a neuro smoothie every morning. So yes, education and figuring out what works for you. Thank you for sharing that. Sounds like a very good restorative diet. But our challenges to eating well, and what we wanted to work on today is to help you problem solve some of these, is fatigue. So just not having the energy to make yourself a full breakfast. It is easier to grab a muffin or just make a piece of toast and have a cup of coffee than making a full breakfast. So I think back to myself, my old breakfast used to be driving to work, running into a shop, buying a bagel of cream cheese and running off. And it was fast and easy, but it didn't give me very good staying power. It didn't leave me feeling great. And my current breakfast now would be like 2 eggs, maybe some ham or some bacon, some sweet potatoes, and some broccoli or some greens, and some avocado. The balanced plate. I feel great eating this, but it does take a lot of work. I can't just run into a shop to make it. And it was also a shift for me to think about eating, greens for breakfast, broccoli, and those types of things. So just wondering if anyone wants to share some tips. Kate has shared one here. She's using Neo Delivery, healthy ingredients that are delivered to the home. cost similar to going to a grocery store now, I'm sure, and you can just pull these foods out and cook them up and they're already there for you. So that is a good way to deal with the fatigue, lower the effort piece as it will be delivered to your door. You still have to put it together, but you're not scrambling to gather up a whole bunch of ingredients. Low mood, that tends to be when we reach more for sugary treats. And I think that piece there that I want to talk about in terms of resiliency is self-awareness, just being aware that, you know, maybe I'm choosing something less than ideal because I'm trying to elevate my mood and that I'm trying to just get relief here. But will this really give me relief? So some questions we can ask ourselves is, will this act of eating these Oreos strengthen me or weaken me? In the moment, it might give me some relief. And it's true in the moment, those Oreos really can make you feel better. But in the long run, they may cause you more problems. And I'd like to just touch on the filling out of depth. Sometimes caregivers, you may find yourself in a caregiving role where you used to be, you never used to do the cooking. So I'm the social worker at the Alzheimer's clinic, and often sometimes a spouse with Alzheimer's will, the nature of that illness is that they are no longer able to cook. Over time, that ability gets taken away, and the spouse who isn't used to cooking and now has to take this on. And how do we deal with that? So we could have the next slide. This is a helpful resource. I am a huge fan of the Canada Food Guide. I don't know if people use it, but if we just followed this Canada Food Guide primarily, I think we'd all be doing pretty well. So this shows you a very tasty plate of food. You know, half that plate is vegetables and fruits. Another section is proteins, water being your drink of choice, and then whole grains. But if you're not used to cooking, there are great recipes on this food guide. Very, very, very simple. And also, I would sign up for their newsletter. It will be delivered to your inbox once a month. New tips, a theme, new recipes. Elaine is sharing a healthy tip, which is that she always makes more than one meal. So she has leftovers, yes, and a big batch of steel cut oats that last for a few days. So definitely some simple strategies, batch cooking. And just having some simple recipes available. One, I like to call this a caregiver's plate. It's super easy to make. Take some ground beef or some ground of your choice, fry it up with some onions, garlic, takes no time at all. Add maybe some soy sauce, some ginger, some sriracha, and then throw in a bag of, coleslaw, mix it all together. It is actually delicious. And you can put some steamed broccoli or avocado with it. And that is a simple meal. So having some simple go-tos, the meal delivery, those things can help you eat better. Any other suggestions from people? What's worked to overcome some of these challenges to getting more whole foods on your diet, in your diet? Not any. But I also like to say, with summer approaching and farmers markets, this is if that's at all practical for you to hit up some farmers markets, that can be another way to just get some extra greens and some inspiration. Okay, Kate. Garlic and onions go in so many dishes. It's true. Add them with mushrooms to organic bread rice. Yes, they spice up anything. Good point. And one thing I think just gets overlooked in terms of, yes, local berries, love them, blueberries. And leaving out healthy snacks, someone has mentioned, so that they're front and foremost. Cut those veggies up, pay for the pre-cut veggies, put them in the fridge so you can grab them. That will help. Make it simple for yourself, as simple as possible. And hydration really helps. Sometimes we're dehydrated, we live our days, we're just drinking water. I'm not drinking water, we live on a lot of coffee and those types of tea to give us energy, and can forget to drink water. So one sort of guideline is to see if you can drink about half your body weight in ounces of water a day. So if you're 120 pounds, that would be about roughly 60 ounces of water, about 7 cups. This is a cup. So it's really not that much. If you can get a small cup so it's not overwhelming, and put it by your coffee or something, that can help you. Remember to drink water. Sparkling water counts. Add flavors, berries to water. Measure it out. Carry a small bottle around. Yes, we're having some great other tips here. Elaine has mentioned that farmers markets do a weekly delivery of what's in season along with recipes that go along with it. So that is an excellent tip if getting out is hard, but we want to get some fresh stuff delivered to the house with the recipes. I love that. Fresh strawberries can be frozen to be used later. Yes. Farmers that deliver is a lifesaver, someone else is saying. So you guys have some very good strategies available to you. I like that. What is our next slide? Well, we're going to move on to movement. So we'll come back to this nutrition piece at the end, but we want to make sure we do talk a bit about movement. So same thing. How can we add in some movement? Before we go on, I just would like to know from people, how is it to get out to exercise on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very easy, 1 being not easy at all? Are people, where are people sort of falling around this piece? That's great. Non-negotiable movement for mental well-being, an 8. Water also helping with cognition and clear. Well, yeah, you're right. A 6. Yeah. A 3. It can be hard to get in the habit. It's true. Okay. Thanks. So yes, a key piece to drink the water. Mental clarity. Movement. So knowing your why. So Kate has said that a walk a day, an hour a day. Kate has said her why. She knows that getting out is a non-negotiable part because it just helps her mental well-being and she wants to just feel better. So key pieces. Know, why is this important for me? And I mean, the key pieces about, we've talked about this, Kate talked about it, regular exercise will help you build your stamina for life stresses. It's just so true. And I've also found that each workout you do that you may not have felt like doing, but you do it, breeds confidence in yourself. I can do hard things. It definitely lowers your stress hormones and ups the happy ones. So how do you get yourself to exercise if it's not already in your framework? And I was not someone who, I was not a sporty kid. I did not love to exercise. And to me, like walking a block was a big deal. My father would have to drag me along, but later on, I was finally like, you know, I want to feel better. I want to feel more fit. So I just started by going to a local track. And first I would just, you know, walk around one lap of the track. And then 1 became 2, and then 2 became 3. And then I slowly started to run. So just one little bit, 1 by 1, it really does help. If you can find something that you can consistently do, and then just, as she's saying, finding the exercise that you love is key. And I think that might be, is that our next slide? How do we find what we love to do? Yes. What do you love? What can you do that you love? But sometimes though with caregiving, that can be a very hard piece. Something you love to do, like maybe you love to go for 2-hour runs, and that is no longer possible right then and there without someone coming in to help you. And it's hard to find that extra support in this moment. So how do you negotiate that within yourself and still do something, be flexible? How can we be flexible and find something that we really like to do that's as close to maybe what we used to do? If that makes sense to you. And walk during Zooms. That's great. Yes, you can walk during Zooms. And the Brain Wellness Program does have all sorts of exercise classes you could take a look at if we're needing to find things to do at home. Next slide, please. I think it's about barriers. Thanks, Kate. Yes, barriers. You're right. What are some things we can do? I found some things that have worked for caregivers and also just for people in general is first things first. So lay out your clothes and then try if you can to get that movement in the morning before the day gets going, especially if the person you're caring for is asleep or it's a lower frantic time. If you can do that first thing in the morning, having a plan really helps. I will do X at such time, committing to a class. So brain wellness exercise class, maybe a minds in motion class or some other community program. Or if none of those are going to work, learn a simple home routine. And I'm just going to show you something very simple that has worked for some people who are just starting. It sounds like a lot of people who already have some pretty good systems in place. But for those of us who are starting small and needing to make a routine, Sometimes it helps to have a board at home. You can write down what you're gonna do when. So this is gonna be a living room workout Mondays and Wednesdays at 10 a.m. for 10 minutes. I'm gonna do the following. It could just be something as simple as a sit to stand. Hips are gonna take me back down to this chair and stand up tall. And just be a mini movement break. Don't need weights if you have water bottles at home. You could be doing some arm raises, 10 of these. So let's say 10 of those squats, 10 of these raises. Then you can put your timer on for a minute and you could just do these cross crawls, or you could be marching. And honestly, if you're feeling a little logy and not the best, even a simple 10-minute movement like that can pay dividends. And yeah, someone has also said committing to someone else, a partner in crime to get out and walk with can really help. And I like how Kate really mentioned that just when she was able to get out, even though she was so tired, it really did help her mental clarity. So we're weighing our options here, taking the long view when we don't feel like it. If we can say, I know I will feel better when I have done this, it's worth it. It really makes a difference. And here we are talking about these varying benefits of the importance of daily movement, which I believe is probably our last slide here. Our hope today was just more around highlighting how important it is to fuel our bodies with good food if we can, and movement, and not letting that slide because of our other commitments, which is the hard challenge here.
And so with that, again, thank you, Kate and Amy, and for all of you for carving time out to join us today, and for participating in the ways that you did, and sharing your boots on the ground experiences, because that's how we all learn. I wish you all a wonderful day.